What is going on, YouTube? I am Lamont at large. Today we are in Owensboro, Kentucky, and I'm here to talk about America's last public execution. A man by the name of Rainey Bethea was executed here in downtown Owensboro, Kentucky for the crime of rape. We're going to talk about that crime. Rainey Bethea was born October 16th, 1909. You fast forward 15 years, you're about 15 years old, 1926, and both of your parents are dead. Now, you're an orphan. You're a teenager, you got no parents, maybe you don't got much for family, some way or another. Bethea makes his way over here to Owensboro, Kentucky. And in the ensuing years, he would work odd jobs, rent a room in somebody's house. Basically, that's all he really did. However, as he got older, he developed a penchant for alcohol and causing trouble when he would drink. So his first run-in with the law was in 1935. He was charged with a breach of the peace, basically drunk in public or whatever. He might have done a few days in jail and they kicked him out. Now, he started upping his criminal activity later on that year. He got caught stealing a couple of purses at a shop here in Owensboro. Now, because the value of the purses was over $25, I guess that constituted a felony, and he was sentenced to 1 year in the prison up in Eddyville. He gets out after 6 months, probably good time, work time or whatever. So he comes back to town. Now he's a felon, and he goes back to just kind of working labor type jobs and drinking too much. So this guy, one night, for some unknown reason, he gets too drunk and he breaks into a house. He gets caught, they call the police, they pick him up. Now, he should have automatically won a one-way ticket back to prison for the next 5 to 10 years. But for some unknown reason, the judge, maybe they took pity on him because this guy didn't have any parents raising him. He kind of raised himself. He had a problem with alcohol. So they said, okay, listen, we'll give you a $100 fine. If you pay the $100 fine today, you can get out of jail. Now, $100 back in those days was the equivalent to about a little over $2,000 now, and he didn't have the money. So he sat in jail for a few more months, did his time for the crime, and he gets out on April 18th, 1936. So he gets out, gets a job, probably rents a room in somebody else's house, and he's doing the same old thing. You know, he'd work in the day, drink at night. Sometimes he would drink during work, whatever was clever, you know what I mean? So Bethea, one night, June 7th, 1936, he's walking this very street that I'm on right now. He's probably drunk. He's looking at all these houses and he's looking for a place to break into. And for some unknown reason, he picks the house at 322 East 5th Street. So to gain access to this house, there was a house next to it, which he basically climbed on top of the roof of the next door property, hopped over on the house at 322 East 5th Street, tore open the screen, broke in the window, and got inside. Now, in that house was a woman by the name of Lishia Edwards. So Miss Edwards is sleeping at the time. She's 70 years old. This guy, Bethea, wakes her up. I don't know if she had a chance to scream because this guy pounced on her and started choking her. This guy chokes the life out of her and proceeds to rape her. After he's done, he's looking through the house to see if there's anything of value to steal. He grabs a couple of her rings and he's trying them on. He's like, oh, this is a nice ring. That's a nice ring. So he grabs whatever he can of value and he leaves the house. So the next day, the downstairs neighbors of Miss Edwards notice that she's not stirring around the house. Now, the floorboards were very weak. So you could probably hear her just like walking around all day long doing whatever. And it was unusually quiet upstairs in her apartment. So the neighbors, they went to check on her, right? Because, you know, she's an elderly lady. You know, she just lives by herself or what have you. So they go to check on her, and there's no answer to the door. Now, this lady doesn't go out very often, and they're kind of concerned because no one's stirring about in the house. So they get a ladder. They go up to the side of the house, and they notice that the screen has been torn. So now they get worried. They said, oh, man. Oh, man. So they go through the house, through the window, and they see her a bloody mess. Now, there's no point in calling a doctor because she's already dead. So they call the local coroner, and he comes and he officially calls her death a homicide, because obviously you just broke into this house and we got a crime scene. After walking up and down the block here for the last 10 minutes and looking online, there is no 322 East 5th Street no longer. A lot of times when notorious crimes like this occur, they often will just go ahead and change the address. So this is the only house right here that's the way it's described could be possibly the crime scene, but this says 314. Now, in the story, people lived downstairs from Miss Edwards, so you can see this is like a duplex. You have 314A and 314B, so it's quite possibly that that door right there would have been her apartment, where it led directly upstairs to those windows right there, and then down right here would have been 314A. I'm not 100% sure. I don't see another structure where he could have like possibly walked on some kind of a walkway. Maybe they knocked it down. This apartment definitely was not there then. So there is no 322, that's 310. This is 314. So 322 could have possibly been that parking lot right there. It was knocked down, or it could have been this house. I'm not 100% sure. I'm just saying this house looks like, from the description of the story, that it could possibly be that. Now, oftentimes, this is where stories like this, you know, you have a story that's 85 years old and you're not going to have a whole lot of information. Now, when they took Miss Edwards to the morgue for autopsy, they started surveying the crime scene for any clues. Now, they noticed, of course, that this was a break-in and this was a robbery. And they also noticed that when they were scouring the scene, they seen a plastic cellulose type ring. Now, one of the detectives that was at the scene knew that this ring was a lot of people in prison. They would make these get these celluloid string type pieces of plastic, and they would make rosaries, necklaces, rings out of it. So he knew that whoever had gone into that apartment to murder Miss Edwards, quite possibly either they knew somebody that was in prison, or in fact they did prison time themselves. Also, 1936, that was just about the time that a little thing called fingerprints became popular and used to fight crime. Now, it was still a new technology with the fingerprints, but about that time is when we realized that each individual, each human being has different fingerprints than the next. So they started doing a crude dusting of fingerprints. Again, this is not a perfect science yet, but we're starting to use fingerprints to solve crimes, and usually the fingerprint technology would be slow to get to smaller towns such as Owensboro. So after, talking with one another about who could have possibly been it, Bethea's name came up. It was quite known that he was a local small-time hood who would break into people's houses. They suspected him of doing and committing other break-ins, but they didn't have much proof about it. And they knew that he had just done some time in jail. They started talking to Bethea's friends, and they identified that ring that was dropped in Miss Edwards' apartment as a ring that was owned by him. So now they put out a warrant for his arrest. And I imagine in the newspapers, they're printing little stories. This man's wanted for questioning, blah, blah, blah. So somebody was at work at some warehouse around here, and they noticed a guy like kind of like hiding under the bushes. It was kind of suspicious, right? And they said, he's like, what are you doing? He looked like he was hiding or something. He's like, oh, I'm just cooling off. Just cooling off from, because it's hot. So immediately he went to his supervisor and said, hey, call the police. I think there's this guy, stupid wasp. I think there's this guy, and he's like hiding out. So by the time the police come, he had already left. So the next day he was spotted at a grocery store in town. And again, they called the police and he got away. So the next time there was a riverboat or like a barge, and it was going over to the next town. So when they seen him, they knew that was Bethea, and they approached him and they said, hey, are you Rainey Bethea, excuse me. And he said, no. Now the cops knew it was him because now they had his picture, but they didn't want to cause a scene because there were a lot of residents looking for this guy, because the story was all over the newspapers out here, and they were worried that a lynch mob was gonna come out and kill him. So they're like, oh, okay, your name is James, whatever fake name he gave. And they're like, well, we're just gonna take you down to the station just to clear some things up. So when they got to the station, they look on the card of certain physical characteristics of criminals, and they noticed that, of course, he had a scar, I believe, on his left side of his head, face or something, and of course he had that same scar. So that's when they knew that they had their man. They had Rainey Bethea in custody. To prevent him from being broken out of jail and possibly lynched, they moved Bethea over to the jail in Louisville, Kentucky, which is a little over 100 miles from here. Now, supposedly, according to testimony, he did confess to the rape of Miss Edwards. They may not have told him that she was dead, but he definitely confessed to that crime. So he goes to jail and they interview him. They say, okay, tell us what happened. And reportedly he confessed. He said that I was, drunk. I broke into her house. He told them how he broke in. He told them what he did. But he was also kind of curious as how they knew he was there. And they showed him that plastic cellulose ring. And he had gotten really pissed off at himself for leaving that ring there. So the reason why he left that ring is, because number one, this guy's, been drinking, but also because he took the ring off to try the rings that he stole from Miss Edwards. So they asked him what he did with the rings. He said that he hid them in this abandoned barn in town. So they take him to the abandoned location, and in fact, yes, they found the stash with the rings inside. So now they have his fingerprints, now they have his confession, and now they have the rings where he showed them where they were. Now, the prosecutor at the time of this case, he was wanting to try Bethea with the rape, the murder, breaking and entering, robbery, all that good stuff, because this guy, he wants him to fry. Now, at that time, Kentucky law stated that anybody who was sentenced to die, it has to be in the electric chair, and it has to be up in Eddyville prison. For some unknown reason, I have no idea, there was a law in Kentucky that the jury for this trial would be unable to convene together until June 22nd of that year. I guess this guy just couldn't wait. This case was big news here in Owensboro and basically Western Kentucky as a whole. So he just said, okay, how about we do this? How about we not charge him with the murder or the robbery? We'll just charge him with the rape. Because there's Kentucky law that states that if you are convicted of rape, it is punishable by the death penalty, and that would be brought upon the accuser or the guilty party by hanging in whatever county the crime took place. So they have a trial for Bethea, and basically before the trial even starts, he says, hey, listen, I'm guilty. Now, if you're not guilty and you plead guilty, then I don't know. But this guy, I guess he wants to just kind of do away with the trial. I don't know. That's what it says. So this guy says, like, yeah, we'll just plead guilty so we can avoid the trial. And the prosecutor's like, no, we're going to proceed with the case. So the prosecution, they lay out all their evidence. They lay out all the facts. His multiple confessions. He confessed 5 different times to this crime. Now, the jury was instructed, all right, look, this is a death penalty case, but you could sentence him to 10 years. You could sentence him to 20 years. You can sentence him to die. It'd be up to you guys. So the trial takes place, and I want to say that the jury came back with a guilty verdict in, I want to say, was it 5 minutes? It's pretty quick. They knew that he was guilty because he confessed 5 different times. So the jury recommends death by hanging. Now, Bethea, his lawyers, Bethea, keep messing up his name, but Bethea, his lawyers, he got some lawyers together and they start filing all these habeas corpus. They start filing all these, just basically trying to delay the sentencing. They're saying that he was coerced into pleading guilty. Now Bethea is saying that he only confessed under quote unquote duress, whatever it is that you want to call that. And lawyers are just really just trying to buy time. And also, listen, this is a black guy, and this was a white woman. So a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, this is this is nothing more than a public lynching, a legal public lynching. And you have certain folks on that side of things saying this is unconstitutional, this is unlawful, this is a cruel and unusual punishment. And the other side is like, well, this guy confessed. We have his fingerprints. It was definitely there. I mean, what more can you want? Yeah, we don't have DNA because they don't know what DNA is back then, but they have them dead to rights, so to speak. So the execution proceeds as follows. Now, here's where the story gets a little bit strange. Now, like I said earlier, this story was all over Western Kentucky, right? Now, the newspapers across the nation from Los Angeles to New York, they didn't pick up this story until a woman by the name of Florence Shoemaker Thompson came to light. Now, she was the sheriff of the county here in Owensboro by default because her husband was the sheriff at the time and he died while he was in office. So it was a law back in those days that if the sheriff died, oftentimes the wife would take over. Now, how do you go from, you're just a wife and now you're the sheriff? Oh, and by the way, guess who's responsible for springing the trap on the gallows when that day comes? That's her. So you got a woman sheriff who this job fell upon her by, tragic luck. And she's the one that's going to have to execute this guy. So can you imagine how nervous she is? She's like, oh my God, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm going to take another man's life. So she's nervous as all get out. So later on, she receives a letter from a Louisville police officer named Arthur Hash, right? So this guy, Arthur Hash, he's like, listen, I'm going to offer my services to you. I'll come to Owensboro. I'll spring the trap. and it'll be between me and you. Nobody has to know except me and you, right? So she takes him up on his offer. So everybody all across the country, they think that this woman sheriff is going to be the one to execute this convicted rapist. Can't say convicted murderer because they didn't try him for the murder. But little do they know, it was a secret deal between Sheriff, I guess you can call her Sheriff Thompson, and Officer Hash that, I'll do it. So that day comes, right? So they signed a death warrant. Now, this execution was supposed to take place at the county courthouse here in Owensboro. Now, they're planning on setting up the gallows. By the way, this story is being sensationalized all over the nation, and they're expecting a large turnout. But wait a minute, somebody said, hey, wait, hang on. We can't have this execution at the courthouse. We just planted a bunch of shrubs, new flowers, and nice grass. Those people are gonna come and tear it up. And, the county manager, he's like, yeah, that's true. We spent a lot of money and time. This was a big project. And we're gonna have 1,000, 2,000 people come and just trample our shrubs and our beautiful flowers. We can't have that. So they moved it to this area right here, which at the time used to be where a county garage where they kept county equipment was right here. This is the convention center here in Owensboro, but it wasn't here before because that was 85 some odd years ago. So all in the newspapers, hey, come on down, witness a public execution. Little did they know, on that day, August 14th, 1936, 20,000 people showed up. They showed up to watch this man hang. And it was amazing. They were shocked. They didn't know there was going to be that many people. People from Indiana, people from Tennessee, people from Eastern Kentucky, all over Ohio. They all just came to this town to witness this man being executed. So on the night beforehand, Bethea, he has his last meal. So August 14th, 1936, he leaves the jail in Louisville to make his 108-mile ride over to Owensboro to get executed. And he's in that van, and man, I wonder what you're thinking to yourself. I wonder what you're thinking. I mean, who knows? Who knows what this guy is thinking, right? Well, this guy is thinking, obviously, man, I'm about to die. And while he was in jail, he converted to Catholicism. And, he was doing his Hail Marys, his prayers to Jesus, doing the rosary, the whole 9 yards, the whole bit. Because, man, you're about to go meet your maker, kid. And all in this area right behind me, all right here, you had many, many, many people they had never seen anything like this before. It was almost like a carnival atmosphere. You had food vendors selling peanuts, hot dogs, sodas, water, everything. Probably they were trying to sell like souvenirs, stuff that they made up. And it was a very exciting but nervous atmosphere. You had, probably in my opinion, over 20,000 people just waiting to watch a man die right in front of their very eyes. So it is about right here on this very street corner, right here, where the gallows was set up. Now, Bethea climbed up to the trap door. There's an X, the executioner. He said, stand on that X right there. And he did as he was told. So Bethea takes off his shoes and socks, and he puts on a new pair of socks. Guess he wants to go out in new socks. I don't understand that, but who knows? Who knows what he's thinking right now? His life is flashing before his very eyes. So he stands on the X, And he gives his final confession to the priest that was with him on standing on the gallows. And then the priest, quickly gets off the gallows because he just doesn't want to, in case he accidentally falls through the trapdoor, who knows. So it was about right here where this, execution occurred. And so after they read his rights or whatever, so a man by the name of Phil Hanna, he was kind of like, he was a guy that would foresee all of the executions in Kentucky. He says, okay, do it. That was the sign to do it. And Bethea is still standing there. Well, he just gave him the sign to do it. What happened? And he yells, like, louder, do it. Nothing. This guy is still standing there. Well, what happened was that Officer Hash, the one that volunteered to spring the trap, this guy, when he showed up to the execution, he showed up wearing this like white suit with a white hat. I don't know why he wore that. This guy didn't want any attention, but wearing an all-white suit would garner you attention. Maybe he thought that nobody would think he was going to be the executioner for that day if he wore those color clothes or something. I guess this guy was so nervous about having to do that he got wasted in the morning, all night into the morning, and he was just there in a drunken stupor. He could barely stand. And everyone's like looking around. They're like, what's going on? They're like thinking, did the sheriff, did she like get scared? This woman, Sheriff Thompson. So finally, one of her deputies just reaches over and just springs the trap. And he fell. Crack, broken neck. Crack, instant death. So he hung there for a few minutes, and a doctor came and checked his heartbeat, and he was declared dead. And that public execution happened right here, right in front of that river. There's a backdrop right there, kids. Pretty interesting, don't you think? We're walking in the Rose Hill Elmwood Cemetery. We're about 2 miles away from the execution site. And so after he was declared dead, he was taken down from the scaffold. Now, it was his wishes to be buried alongside his dad in South Carolina. But here's the problem. This guy has no money. So after he had died, I guess guys are looking around and saying like, all right, so he wanted to be taken down to South Carolina to be with his folks. Anybody got any money for gas or something? And nobody, everyone pulled out their pockets like, yep, nothing here. So he was taken to this cemetery right here, and he was buried in I guess you could say it was a pauper's grave. He has no marker. Just like anybody else, any person that's declared indigent, they're oftentimes buried in a mass grave, and it looks like that's what they did right here. Now, this is the general area where in those days, people that were buried with no money were put. So this marker right here, this is the area where he would have been buried. So you got somewhere in this potter's field is the grave of Rainey Bethea. Somewhere over here. This marker right there, potter's field. Okay, guys, we got just one more stop to conclude this video. Not even 1,500 yards on the other side of the cemetery lies the victim in this crime, and that is Lishia Edwards. That is the Edwards family stone right there. and protected underneath this tree, shielded from the other graves, hidden from the world. You would pass this grave and would never know this story. Is Lishia Edwards. Imagine how many people come up and down this path right here and they don't even know the story behind this woman, her grave, and why she's here at the hands of that scumbag. And let me say this to conclude this video. I read an interesting article online, and this interesting article, it had a couple buzzwords that I want to share with you guys. One of those words is patriarchy. You should Google it right now. Go look it up. That's a word that you should learn and know the meaning behind it, or the true meaning behind it, depending on how you look at things. The other is racism. Very interesting. And this crime does have a racial component, and that being because Bethea was black and his victim was white. Now, I wouldn't care if it was the other way around, if it was an older person doing it to a younger person. We don't do it. We don't do it when we're on drugs. We don't do it when we're drunk. You do not rape people. Miss Edwards, Lishia right here, that could be my mom. And I worry about my mother living by herself. That could be my sister. That could be my grandmother. That could be your grandmother, your mother, your cousin, your auntie. And of all the articles online, nobody talks about the victim, because everyone's interested in the killer, and, it is what it is. It drives the ratings. What do you want? But this is one of the reasons why I have this channel, to explain the story and also to show you how real it is. It's one thing to tell a story when you're in your studio. It's another thing to be out here in this environment, in the humidity, driving hundreds and thousands of miles. And it's to tell a story not only of a public execution, but beyond the circus atmosphere that event took place, past the selling of the lemonade, the hot dogs, the giddy excitement, little kids trying to, peek over adult shoulders to see what was going on. Behind all of that was a woman that was brutally murdered, and that murderer's name is Rainey Bethea. How do you get your fingerprints there? I don't know, kid. You tell me. So before anybody judges and says, oh, the olden times, they were racist. Oh, yeah, they were. Of course they were. But that guy is also a murderer and a rapist and a thief and a drunk. Rest in peace to Miss Lishia Edwards. Justice was done, and I hope she knows that. All right, guys, I am out of here. It's on to the next episode, on to the next story. Live but not live, still alive by God's good graces. I am Lamont at large, and I will see you on the next vlog. Peace out.